Buddham Sharanam Gacchami.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, the Dean Academics, Mr. Mukesh, distinguished members on the dais, colleagues, friends. First of all, I would start by thanking the university for giving me this opportunity to share some of my ideas with all of you. And now, having said that, let me go on to my business. And मैं कोशिश करूँगा हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों से मिला जुला के करने के लिए. And but Hindi is not my mother tongue, and so kindly bear with me. The paper is titled "The Inscribed Everyday Histories of the Early Deccan: Perspectives from Buddhist Sites." I'll start off by saying that what I intend doing essentially is to suggest that I'm basically focusing on the post-Mauryan century, roughly 200 BC to 8300. And this is a period which in the history of the Deccan is considered to be a sort of a formative period in constituting the basic personality of the Deccan. And when I say that, what I have in mind is to just quickly introduce to you two basic ideas. One is that this is a period which experienced the formation of what we call Janapadas in the Deccan. And when I say the formation of Janapadas in the Deccan, Janapadas would basically stand for agrarian localities. And when I say agrarian localities, what I basically mean is that one locality could have 5 or 7 rural settlements, another locality could have little more or little less. And so that's the way the agrarian localities are formed. And when we say agrarian localities are being formed, what we've got to keep in mind is that the Deccan is an area which spans Maharashtra, northern Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh, the whole of it. Yet the development of Janapadas was an actually uneven process. Depending on how historical forces converged or did not converge in a given area, Janapadas evolved or did not evolve. And therefore it's an uneven thing. And therefore the point that I like to basically make is that students who basically read the fact that the Satavahana rulers were known as Dakshina Patheshwara, lords of the Deccan, it doesn't mean that the whole of the Deccan was an integrated whole in social and economic terms. And therefore there was unevenness essentially built into that. That's something that we got to keep in mind. And when we talk about the Janapadas, what we call Janapadas in North India are known as Nadus in the south. Nadus are not something which are only confined to Tamil Nadu. Nadus are also there for Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka. And so when you talk about Nadus, the Nadus are the same as the Janapadas that you have agrarian localities in the north. Nadus are there in the south. And so once you talk about the Janapadas, you are not wondering that where do you find this reference to Janapadas. All I would say is look at a text like the Puranas. For example, Vishnu Purana, if you see, you will find a large number of Janapadas that have been formed in northern India. If you look into Kalidas, you will find a whole range of Janapadas covering large parts of the subcontinent, and that's how Janapadas are being basically formed. Now, why I talk about the Janapadas is largely because they provide the context for the emergence of what we call secondary state formation. And when you say secondary state formation, what I'm basically trying to argue is that increasingly over the last 30-35 years, researchers have shown that the Mauryas that we talk about, or the Mauryan Empire that we talked about, got to be necessarily seen in the light of the fact that the Mauryas expanded horizontally, did not move vertically in all areas. Basically meaning that when the Mauryas moved into the Deccan, in northern India, they had both horizontal and vertical spread. Whereas outside northern India, it wasn't so, and therefore if they move on to the Deccan, what they do is they spread it over the Deccan horizontally. Now vertically what they're doing is basically using the local chieftains, tribal chiefs, as cogs in the administrative mechanism. And therefore these chiefs who are being used by the Mauryan state as some kind of intermediaries, now these people, because the experience they gain by virtue of association with the Mauryas, from that experience they learn how to manage labor as well as produce, and therefore in the post-Mauryan period, these chieftains create small incipient state structures. And that's how things happen. And that's what is the secondary state. A secondary state is a state which happens chronologically later than states in developed areas, and plus it also evolves because of interactions with developed areas. And that's how the secondary state formation business starts off. And it's not just typical to the post-Mauryan period, secondary states or state structures which go on in Indian history as late as 17th, 18th centuries as well, depending on whether it's central India or it's northeastern India and so on. So that is the context that one basically try to put across. Having said that, then the point that I'd like to basically make is that once you come down to the postmodern context in the Deccan, under the Satavahanas largely, if one sees, what one will basically notice is that you have expressions like ahara. Now, aharas are the administrative divisions that you have under the Satavahanas in the Deccan, and they spread right from northern Karnataka to Maharashtra to Gujarat. And if you look at it a little closely, what you would find, ahara also means food. And so the historians basically feel that aharas are being talked about in a situation where the fruit-producing zones are being separated from the non-fruit-producing zones. And therefore that uneven that essentially built into the system that comes out quite well. Interestingly, the aharas are centered around some important archaeological sites. For example, you would have a Govardhan ahara centered on Nasik, or you have some other ahara centered on Brahmagiri, and some other ahara centered on Vadgam Madhavpur. These are all archaeological sites, and so these are the centers, capital centers from where these aharas are operating and so on and so forth. Now, who is that who's controlling the aharas? Now, the people who are controlling the aharas are known to us as the Maharathis and the Mahabhojas. But the Maharathis and Mahabhojas are an interesting category because these Satavahanas also start off as local chieftains, and they marry into one of the important Maharathi families, and that gives them the context to expand and create a larger kingdom. And so that is how, the development in Deccan are happening. It is the Maharathis and Mahabhojas coming up. That's not all. Below them, you also have another category of people known as Bhojas and Rayas. Now, the Bhojas and Rayas are also chiefs. They're not necessarily kings, but they are basically chieftain varieties of people. And what I say, a good example of that comes out from an interesting site called Kanaganahalli. Now, Kanaganahalli is a site near Gulbarga in northern Karnataka. Now, if you look at the site, you find reference to about half a dozen of these Rayas and these Bhojas. Because they are the donors who are sustaining the site of Kanaganahalli. And interestingly, Oshoka, who is depicted as Kanaganahalli, is also referred to as Rayo, R-A-Y-O. Rayo would basically mean Raja. So the Satavahanas did not use any pompous titles, but Satavahanas called themselves just Rajas, and so they were also known as Rayas. And so Oshoka, who predates the Satavahanas by about 200-300 years, were also perceived by contemporary people as a Rayo, any other Raja, and that's how he's been presented and depicted. And so that gives us some sense of the fact that the development that we are talking about in the Deccan are basically segmented. They are not integrated from coast to coast and so on and so forth. Now when I say that, what is that we get to know about these developments that one goes on to talk about? Now interestingly, what one finds is that a range of crops and cereals come up from archaeological sites. Some of them refer to in the inscriptions, and some of them also refer to in literature. So when I talk about literature, the point that I'm making basically is that we have a text called Gatha Saptasati. Gatha Saptasati is a little bit controversial among people because some would place it to the postmodern centuries, the others would place it to the 5th century AD. Now, whatever the date that you might have, but all that put together, they basically capture the vitality of rural ways of life. When I say vitality of rural ways of life, what I basically mean is they're talking about the crops, the cereals, the flowers, the fruits, talk about village life, talk about a range of emotions associated with humanity, talk about chieftains, they talk about lovers, and all kinds of emotions they basically want to capture. And so that is what basically tells us that a whole range of grains and crops and cereals are being produced in the Deccan in this particular period. Now, one item that attracts attention is coconut. Now, coconut is important for the Deccan, especially the western coast, largely because coconut fiber, coconut wine, then you have coconut oil wood, and which contributes to the growth of the western Deccan in this postmodern century. And besides these things, the other point that got to be kept in mind is you have inscriptional data coming up from various sites on the western Deccan, which suggests that people are investing in plantations. And plantations of a wide range of what we call things like plantations of trees of karanja or timber, banyan, jambu, palmyra, sal tree, mangoes. They are all being engaged in. And particularly in the context of Kanheri, there's a reference to a field being what you call worked out and plantations being developed there. And therefore, what we have is a wide range of development taking place, which are helping the growth of a, what should I say, rich agrarian foundation. Now that rich agrarian foundation goes on also to be what you call sustain the artisan sector, the urban sector, which is evolving in this particular period. In the Deccan, a wide range of what we call cities, artisan centers, markets, they start growing up, and agriculture is at the foundation. Now, transport of goods and commodities is essentially being carried out by the buffaloes, bullocks, ass. They are all being used as traction and for carrying loads. And interestingly, at Kanaganahalli, the site that I just mentioned in Karnataka, you have depictions of bullock carts and horse and elephant drawn chariots. You also have references coming up in literary texts to this hydraulic mechanics, and so you have a term called odyantrikals. You also have tanks and wells and things coming up, and so this prosperity in the agrarian sector largely goes on to sustain the urban world. And agriculture and artisan sector plus the markets and exchange, that is what is the foundation of these rock-cut monuments that we have, whether it's in the Western Deccan or in the Eastern Deccan or the Central Deccan. They've all been sustained through these developments that are basically taking place. Now that agriculture is doing extremely well can also be seen from the fact that you have evidence for granaries coming up from a good number of sites. The evidence for granaries are noticed at sites like Vadgam Madhapur in Karnataka. They come up from Dhulikatta in Telangana. You also have the evidence for granaries at Satanikota, Kunur district in Andhra Pradesh. And interestingly, the ones at Vadgam Madhapur and the ones at Dhulikatta, now these are in the shape of inverted pyramids. And within those structures, you have evidence for coins, gold beads, and so on, suggesting that exchanges were perhaps happening at those particular sites and so on. Now, the point is, when you come down to this rock-cut art, what you find is that there are about 80 sites with evidence for about 1,200 rock-cut caves in the Western Deccan alone. And there are hundreds of these short inscriptions. Now, if you look into those inscriptions, what you find is that who are the people who are the donors? Now, a wide range of artisan groups emerge as donors. You have merchants, bankers, treasurers, all kinds of guilds. But the point is, two important categories emerge as the major contributors to this construction that are happening, these caves and things that are happening on the Western Deccan. The two major categories are, one is your merchant category. Now, when you talk about merchants, they are not a homogeneous category. The merchants are essentially differentiated. Now, that they're differentiated can be seen from the fact that you have terms like Vanija, you have terms like Seti, you have terms like Sartavaha, and so on, categorizing the merchants. So is the case with the goldsmith. There's not one homogeneous entity, but they are again graded. And so besides these categories, you also have a category called Gahapati. Gahapati is a category all of us realize that though it started in the age of the Buddha to basically represent the well-to-do cutting across Varna lines, in this context of the postmodern situation, the Gahapati is broadly seen as a householder. And there are other what we call categories of Gahapatis who are having prefixes of various kinds, which suggest the well-to-do Gahapati, the Gahapati chief, or something like that. Now, besides the Gahapatis, you also have a category called the Kutumbin. The Kutumbina, Kutumbin, that's the category. Kutumbina or Kutumbin would basically be a well-to-do peasant. Now, people today translate that term to mean the well-to-do middle peasant. And when we say middle peasant, the peasantry who is working on his field with his family labor and so on. So that's the other category. So these are people who emerge as the major donors in the Deccan. Now, what is that people are donating for? They're donating for rock-cut monuments. They're donating for caves or lenas. They're donating for cisterns, bodhis. They're donating for various kinds of structures to be built in this cave. And so a wide range of what you call activities are being carried out. Now, interestingly, at Kanheri, you have a reference to an interesting piece of evidence which suggests as to how the Buddhist monks themselves are acting as overseers, ensuring that a particular cave structure is being built, and then what the stone mason is doing or the stone polisher is doing and a category of other workers are doing is all being overseen by the monks. So it's not as if the monks are the ones who are only engaged in philosophical discussions and reading and writing, but these are worldly matters which also engage their attention. That's the story that basically unfolds. Besides that, what you find is that this is a period where you have the rise of a whole range of guilds, or what is the term we have is shreni. And so you have what you call guilds being invested with money, guilds being donated with land, and so on. When you talk about land donations, starting from villages to various nivartanas of land are being donated. And when you say nivartanas of land, from 2 to 26 nivartanas of land are being donated, and a nivartana is about 6 acres. So one can multiply that and have that figure. And so this is what's been donated. And in terms of money, there are references to from 200 to 1600 kahapanas or kashapanas being transferred on, and endowments being created. Now it is these guilds who act as what you manage endowments, and they invest that money in trade, and from the profit they make, they go on to fulfill the obligations that they are entrusted with. So, and when you're talking about the guilds, varieties of guilds are being talked about. The guilds of potters, the guilds of bamboo workers, and in fact a wide range of what you call professions basically work out the guilds. Now, organizing in guilds, the advantage it basically produces is that the guilds are the ones who basically reduce cost of production. They are the ones who decide what to produce, in what quantum, and how to market and distribute things. They're all taken up by the guilds themselves. Now, this period in Deccan is also what you are coinciding with the coming of land grants. And when we say land grants are made not just to Brahmanas, land grants also to the monks and the monasteries. And in both the cases, neither the Brahmana nor the monk is a cultivator. And so, the making of land grants itself creates graded what you call rights and land that the other people who brought into managing cultivation and so on and so forth. Luckily, the post-modern centuries have fewer number of land grants, and the demands on these land grants are not very oppressive, which they would become subsequently. And the other point to be noted is that the land grants that are being made in this period are essentially recorded on stone, unlike on copper plates, which happens to begin with the Ikshvakus and their contemporaries like the Sarankai and others on the Andhra coast. Besides what you call these things, the other issue that's got to be remembered is that this period in the Western Deccan is characterized by enormous mobility. And when I say mobility, I mean mobility in both the senses, physical as well as social. Physical mobility can be seen from the fact of the interactions that have been carried out between the towns, the villages, the pastoralists, and the hunter-gatherers, and a wide range of goods and commodities are being exchanged. Similarly, the interaction that happens between the internal towns, the settlements on the passes, for example, with the Western Ghats, and what you call port towns that you have. The port towns that you have at Bharukacha, Chaul, Kalyan, and so on, they are linked to all these centers, and exchanges are what you call happening. And you have reference to a range of towns, over half a dozen of towns emerge in the records which tell us as to how people are traveling distances to make donations at this monastic establishment. And when you say people are traveling, it's just not men and women both travel. The bhikkhu, the bhikkhunis, the layman and laywoman, all of them are traveling actually. And what is interesting is if you look at these inscriptions, which are in hundreds, because hundreds of them are on the western coast, and a site like Karaganahalli itself produces about 150 of them, from 150 to 200 of them. That's the range. If you look at a site like Amaravati, that itself accounts for about 200 of these inscriptions. So 121 of them are in the Ludus list, plus more you add, so it's about 200 of them that you have. And so that's the range of inscriptions that the donors basically are represented by. And if you look at these what you call inscriptions, what they go on to tell us is that people are traveling distances and making the donations, one. Secondly, a wide range of people are making donations. In some cases, royalty and officials associated with royalty, yes. In some cases, it is professional groups that I just mentioned, that the iron worker, the smith, the goldsmith, the banker, the merchant. Also what you have is the fisherman, the harikar, the plowman, the weaver. Now these categories also make donations, suggesting that people who we normally consider to be at the bottom of society, that they are also participating in the donations. But when they're making donations, what is that they are interested in recording? Interestingly, none of the inscriptions that you find in any of this the western, eastern, or the central Deccan makes any reference to Varna or Jati. There are no reference to Varna or Jati. What are referred to are essentially the name of the person, the occupation that he comes from or engages in, and the place he comes from. So these are the indicators. Maybe in a mobile society, this is what essentially matters. So maybe the Varna and Jati were not so central to the making of society as we normally assume. And when you look into the question of religion or the social composition, that comes out far more interesting in the sense that under the Satavahanas, it's a society in the making, a society in transition. Brahmanism is still not entrenched in the Deccan at that particular point. You have find Buddhism, Brahmanism competing for royal attention. If you look at the inscription in Nasik, look at the inscription in Anaghat, the story comes out quite well. That Buddhism is patronized along with Brahmanism, Vedic sacrifices are engaged in, Bhagavatism is patronized, along with that Buddhism also is there. And what I'm saying, the story gets beautifully captured if you look into a site like Nagarjunakonda. And Nagarjunakonda, if you have 18 Brahmanical shrines, you have 30 Buddhist monuments as well. Yeah, the monuments as well. And so that captures that essence that one is trying to really argue. And interestingly, at sites like Kanheri and sites like Karle, you also have evidence for a good number of Yavana donations. Now when you say Yavana, the point I would like to basically make, a Yavana is a term which is normally used for somebody who comes from the West. Now when you say West, it could be Central Asia, it could be West Asia also. Now the point that students should basically remember is that Pardesi was not somebody from outside India. The Desha was a term which was being used increasingly to mean countryside. That you belong to one Desha, if you are from one countryside, I belong to another Desha, you're from another countryside. If you say Pardesi, the Pardesi basically meant that I'm not from your Desha, your countryside. And therefore it has no implications of foreigner or Indian. So that's something that we want to keep in mind. And so what basically, Yavana is somebody who is an outsider. At times the expression Mlecha is also being used for an outsider. Now the Mlecha basically somebody who culturally does not suit into my milieu. Culturally doesn't do the same things as we do. So that is the term for Mlecha, that's the term for Yavana. And so these Yavanas are also engaging in large-scale donation to these monasteries. So in society, not only are Buddhists, Jainas, and people belonging to the Brahmanical faith, but you also have Yavanas who are a part of the society, trading and doing things. So that's the point that one got to keep in mind. Now, interestingly, you have also some data relating to women. Now, the data that relates to women is interesting. This is quickly said. What I would basically like to point out is that these references to mothers, daughters, sisters, so it's in that category that you find women being referred to. And you have women donation in good numbers, though the numbers are not as impressive as they emerge from Sanchi and Mathura. And so, but nevertheless, women are there. Well, when you talk about the Deccan, the presence of women seems to be greater on the eastern Deccan compared to the western Deccan. And the reason for women being more in the eastern Deccan could be because of Amaravati, the Mahachaitya. That could be the attraction for women being donating larger numbers there. And what you find interesting is women retain the natural connection even after marriage. Mothers and daughters, they all refer to in this donation. So why I'm making that point is, it's by the Gupta times, 5th century AD and after, that the idea of Gotrantara comes in. Once this Brahmanical idea of Gotrantara comes in, women who are married off are supposed to cut off their Gotra links with the natural family. And so that is still not very much there. Besides that, it's a society in transition also comes out from the fact that in the Deccan, inscriptions also use terms like putra. The idea of putra is very strong without the family linkages. And the metronymic, use of metronymics is very important. That metronymics is being used can be seen from the fact that you have expressions like Gautami Putra, Vasishti Putra, and so on. And so that a society is still in transition, that Brahmanism is still not governed by Brahmanical ideology. Brahmanical ideology is still not important to the making of strategies of domination. Now that's the idea that comes up quite well, so it's gradually penetrating, but still not dominant. That's the story that basically gets captured. And so that's the other thing that basically emerges. And then, besides what you call these issues, the last one or two points I would like to basically make is that in the Deccan at this point, not just Deccan in fact, the whole of the Indian subcontinent, is that Buddhism happens to be at this juncture what we call the imitable model. The imitable model, when I say what I mean is, you see, when you want to come down to the Gupta period and after, Brahmanism and Brahminical ideology, Puranic Hinduism, they become the imitable models. You want to rise in society, then you move in that direction. You pick up these ideas, values, and that's how you think that doing that is the right thing, the politically and socially the correct thing to do, and that's what allows you to rise in status and so on. But that was not the case till the coming of the Guptas, or the Gupta period. Before that, in all over the subcontinent, including the Deccan, it was Buddhism which provided basic framework to be imitated. That's what the imitating model, and that's what's basically happening. And therefore, people who would have been lumped together and dumped in the category of Shudras, they move on to Buddhism. At times they move on to Jainism. So their statuses are secured. They are almost, they imagined to be on equal terms with the other members of the, followers. And that. Now, finally, I think I'll end this thing by making just two small points. That is, one is what you find happening in the Deccan, as in North India, is the emergence of site complexes. And when I say site complexes, what I mean is if you look into the Eastern Deccan, you have Amaravati, and you also have a Dharanikota. And they are separated, just by less than 2 kilometers from each other. And so it's actually a site complex, that you have a Buddhist site, major Buddhist site, close to a commercial center. And so the Buddhist site is sustained by this commercial center, and the commercial center and its people draw the social sanctional legitimacy from that site. Same thing you will find at Kanaganahalli in the northern Karnataka near Gulbarga. Kanaganahalli and Sannati. Sannati is the administrative and economic center. Kanaganahalli is the Buddhist thing. Now, this is not just peculiar to the Deccan. This is already evident in northern India. Sanchi, where we are now, Sanchi, Vidisha, that's a complex. If you look into further north, you will find Sarnath, Varanasi. That's what you call another site complex. And that, what you have here is also sort of sanctioned by literature. If you look at Arthashastra makes it very clear that monasteries, heretics, now these guys have to be out of the habitat, basic settlement. And so the major settlement is on the sites that you would have these monasteries, but not in the same. Now, the individual citizens in the monastery can go and worship the Buddha within the complex. But the actual monks, the Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni, if they are to stay, if they are to worship, they will have to do it outside the basic settlement. And therefore, monasteries are usually outside that complex. And this is the pattern that you basically find emerging in the Deccan as well. And finally, the last point I would like to basically make is that when you look into the development that I think largely what people are arguing for, what strikes attention is that there are two things that emerge. That when you talk about aspects of religion, philosophy, and ideas, religions can vary. What Brahmanism might stand for, or what Buddhism or Jainism might stand for, they might vary. But when it comes to the material culture, ways of life, eating habits, cultural traditions, we all are a part of a united cultural traditions or cultures which go on to constitute India as a whole. These ideas are seen in terms of food habits, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, whatever you might talk about, or in terms of life ways. There's a whole range of commonality that cuts across religions. That's something that you've got to keep in mind. Secondly, despite what you call apparent, despite apparent commonness, there are variations across regions. And the variations are represented not only in the ways of life, variations are also represented in terms of art forms. The best way, if you look into the Deccan itself, the pattern that evolved in Western Deccan, Eastern Deccan, and the Central Deccan, they vary. A good example at this moment I can make is, if you look at the Central Deccan. Central Deccan's tourism is based not on agriculture, it's based on artisanal production, to do with iron and associated activity and trade, not agriculture. If you look into other kinds of variations, good example I can provide at this moment is drawing on the way the Buddha is being represented. Look at the Buddha representation from Nagarjuna Konda, and look at the Buddha representations at Kanaganahalli. You can find the local imprint, local flavor in all its vividness coming through. Nagarjuna Konda Buddha is a, stockily built Buddha with a round face. If you look at the Kanaganahalli Buddha, it's the local imprint that characterizes the overall making of Buddha, including the face. And these are available in the museum, so one can make the contrast and see. And so the regional variations will impact the making of this local tradition. That's something that we got to keep in mind. Thank you.